What miracle did Elisha perform for the sons of the prophets in 2 Kings 6? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Kings on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 1 to 7. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 1. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Kings chapter 6, beginning of verse 1. And the sons of the prophet said to Elisha, "See now, the place where we dwell with you is too small for us. Please let us go to the Jordan, and let every man take a beam from there, and let us make there a place where we may dwell." So he answered, "Go." Then one said, "Please consent to go with your servants." And he answered, "I will go." And he went with them. And when they came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. But as one was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water, and he cried out and said, "Alas, master, for it was borrowed." So the man of God said, "Where did it fall?" And he showed him the place. So he cut off a stick and threw it in there, and he made the iron float. Therefore he said, "Pick it up for yourself." So he reached out his hand and took it. In the last chapter, we had the account of Naaman the leper being healed by God through Elisha. Naaman was a Syrian, meaning he was a non-Israelite and a Gentile. At this time in history, the Gentiles had largely abandoned God, and although there would be some Gentile proselytes to the Hebrew faith, those were few and far between. After the miracle, though, Naaman came to faith in Jehovah as the only God of this universe. He renounced all other gods and vowed to worship Jehovah alone from there on out, showing us that Gentiles could be saved during the Mosaic time, but it required that they first abandon their idolatry and serve the true God alone. Now, Naaman didn't become an Israelite here, and still wasn't bound by the law of Moses, but as we will learn in Romans, the law of Moses wasn't what saved the Jews. It was obedience to God and faith. God gave Israel the law of Moses, and so his expectations for them was that they follow it in faith, and when they didn't, that they adhered to the remedies found therein concerning the sacrifices. The blood of bulls and goats didn't remit those sins, but God's grace received through obedient faith did. For Naaman, as a Gentile, he was under the covenant that God made with the patriarchs like Noah back in Genesis chapter 8 and 9. He was to worship Jehovah alone and not idols. He would offer sacrifices to God, and he was to adhere to the morality found under this covenant. Doing so in faith would result in God's grace being extended to him, just as it was when his leprosy was cured, with God's grace not being the forgiveness of sins there, but the cleansing of his leprosy. For us today, we're under the new covenant. Jesus' blood paid the price for sin and ushered in this new covenant, which is found in the New Testament. When we in faith do what God says, we too can receive grace and the hope of heaven for all eternity. Coming to chapter 6 now, and we have yet another set of miracles performed by Elisha, showing us that he is the prophet of God. The first one is a private miracle, which would have only been witnessed by the sons of the prophets, but would nonetheless produce faith in them that Elisha was from God. The setting is not specifically said, but due to the subsequent events taking place near the Jordan, and due to the fact that we know that there was a school of the prophets there, we can be fairly certain that the setting is Jericho. Regardless, though, the place that housed the school of the prophets was getting too small, and they needed to build a larger one. But instead of just simply building an addition, they first asked Elisha if such would be done. Why? Because perhaps it wasn't God's will that this be done. Perhaps they thought that God wanted them to establish a school someplace else, with only some of them going while others remaining behind. There could have been a whole host of things that Elisha could have said, but seeking out God's will from God's prophet was a wise thing to do. For us today, there are no prophets to speak to, but we can pray to God for something we want to do to be his will. We can consult the scriptures in order to know what God's will is, and we can consult other Christians to provide advice, but we should always be seeking to do the will of the Lord in all that we do. For these prophets, Elisha told them that they could indeed build another place to dwell. But instead of building an addition onto what already existed, the prophets desired to do so closer to the Jordan. Now this could be for numerous reasons, two of which could be, number one, It would have been easier to build the house there since the wood was coming from there, and 2, it might have been that there was no room to build this addition. Elisha approved this, and so the sons of the prophets went down to the Jordan, and each of them helped in the building of this house. Elisha went along too, and at these prophets' request. But during the process, one of the sons of the prophets swung his axe, and the iron axe head fell into the Jordan River, sinking. Now, lucky for the man that it didn't strike anyone, but the axe was borrowed, and so he would be responsible for replacing it. He came to Elisha with his problem, and although he didn't outright ask for Elisha's help, by coming to Elisha, that was what was in effect this man was saying. Elisha asked where the axe head fell. He struck off a stick, threw it in there, and made the axe head float. When it floated, he told the man to go out and fetch it. Now let's make one thing clear. Iron does not float in water on its own. Elisha didn't fish the iron out of the water with the stick. This was a miracle, pure and simple. And by the power of God, this was possible. This man had to go out and fetch the axe head if he wanted it back, which means he had to have faith that Elisha had done what he said. Today, people have trouble accepting miracles because we don't see people performing them today. We have become doubting Thomases. Jesus said, "Blessed is the man who has not seen yet believes." And on what should we base our belief? On the testimony of what was written here, on the fact that God is the creator of the universe, made everything as we see it, and therefore can bend nature to his will, and on the fact that whatever God has promised has always come to pass. This miracle doesn't shake my faith, it strengthens it, just as it did for the sons of the prophets here. Let's then all come to faith in God and be saved. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 8 to 23, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.